And I'm Amelia.
We are the co-founders of Wildflower Delivery Co., a modern sewing kit company. Today, we're sewing our twisted fabric headband. To make this project, we'll be learning and practicing two main skills: sewing and turning a tube shape, which is a technique often used to make straps and ties, and stitching elastic inside a fabric enclosure.
So let's jump in.
The kit comes with everything you'll need to complete the project: access to an illustrated guidebook with step-by-step instructions corresponding to the steps in this video, fabric printed with the textile print you chose and the pattern piece templates, and a notions kit with a DIY turning tool, 5 inches of elastic, a preloaded bobbin, matching thread, pins, sewing needles, and a seam ripper, just because we know things don't always go as planned. There are 3 additional tools you need to complete the project. You'll need a sewing machine, an iron, and scissors. Before we jump in, I'm going to explain the basic steps to complete the project. First, we'll cut out the fabric. Then we'll sew and turn the 2 straps of the headband, loop them together like a chain, attach the 2 ends with elastic, make a casing that covers the raw elastic, and then top stitch the casing to finish the headband. And voila! So we'll start by laying out the fabric on a flat surface. The pattern templates are printed directly on the fabric, so you just need to cut around the edge of the pieces. A few notes about our paperless pattern system. The textile print extends all the way to the cut line of the pattern pieces, and the pieces are designed with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So just to be clear, the seams are the lines of stitching that hold the pieces together, and the seam allowance is the extra space between the stitch line and the edge of the fabric that will end up on the inside of the piece. Because the textile print extends past the stitch line into the seam allowance, even if you don't stitch everything perfectly straight, you'll never see a gap or any unprinted fabric. The fabric is also printed directly with notches, so there's no need to clip them. Notches are the small marks perpendicular to the cut edge that act as guides while you're sewing. They help match corresponding pieces, line up a pocket, or show you where to hem. So great, we can go ahead and cut. The pieces are cut out, now we can sew. We're beginning with the headband straps. To start off, we will fold the piece in half, right sides together. The right side of the fabric is the bright printed side. And then we will pin and stitch along the curved edge. Turn it inside out and press it. But first things first, we included a turning tool in your kit to make the process a little easier. So take that tool and clip it into the middle of one end of the fabric, and then lie the cord of the turning tool down the center. Next, we'll fold the piece in half and then pin along the curved edge. With pinning, you'll want to insert the pins perpendicular to the cut line so that they're easier to remove as you sew. Now that the piece is pinned, we're ready to sew. If you're brand new to sewing, check out our Sewing Machine 101 video. We go over all the basics there. The seam allowance for this project is a 1/2 inch. So you can use the guides on the needle plate to line up the edge of the fabric, and the notch on the fabric should line up with your needle. So before I start a seam, I always want to backstitch, and that's just to lock in the stitch. So you'll want to do a couple of stitches forward, and then you'll do a couple of stitches backward, and then you'll go back over those stitches that you just made forward. And then we'll just go slow and steady and continue down the curved edge, always keeping the cut edge of the fabric lined up with the 1/2 inch mark. Backstitch at the end, and you've sewn your first seam. Now that this is sewn, the last thing we need to do is turn the piece inside out so that the seam allowance ends up on the inside and the bright pattern ends up on the outside. The turning tool is a game changer in this step. So you'll take the safety pin and you use that to sort of start easing the one end back through the piece. So start it with the safety pin, and once you kind of get it started, you can use the tail end of the cord to help you guide the safety pin back through the piece. You want to be just a little bit gentle because you don't want the safety pin to open up inside the piece. This process can be a little bit tricky, but slow and steady, and you'll get there. Once you can hold onto the fabric, it's better to hold the fabric than the safety pin. So just like that, my piece is now right side up. The last part is pressing the strap flat. I like to use my fingers to sort of position the seam down the middle, and then I'll use the tip of the iron to start pressing it. I like to work from the middle to the outside. So when I'm finished here, I'll have one side that has the seam down the middle, and then I'll have the other side that's just clean and flat with no seam. And then I'll repeat the same process with the second strap, and we'll move on from there. We now have two identical headband straps. And to finish the headband, we'll loop them together, attach the ends with a piece of elastic, and cover that elastic with a fabric casing. For the looping, take one strap and with the seam side up, make it into the shape of a U so that the ends don't show the seam. And then overlap those ends and pin those overlapping ends. This will be the side of the headband that you see when you're wearing it. Repeat that process with the second strap, except this time, before you pin them, you'll just want to loop the strap through the first one and then pin them to overlap. So this makes up two little loops, links of a chain. Now we'll take our piece of elastic and we're just gonna insert it into the part that we just pinned together about 1/4 of an inch. So it's overlapping, and you'll see the strap end, the elastic, and then the strap end. Then we'll take this little sandwich to the machine and we'll stitch it to secure it. It's important that this connection is pretty strong, so I like to reinforce it by going back and forth across 3 times. You can even flip the headband around instead of using the backstitch if you find that more comfortable. This part of the fabric will be covered by a casing later, so you're going for strength over beauty with these stitches. Now that the elastic is attached to this side, we're actually going to hold off on completing the circle because we need to make the fabric casing that covers the elastic and hides these messy seam connections. To make the casing, we'll use a really similar method we did to making the headband straps. We'll use our turning tool and clip that into one of the short ends of the piece. And then laying the cord down the center, fold that piece in half, and we'll pin it and then sew it on the machine with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So while you sew this, make sure to push the cord inside the seam against the fold so you won't risk catching it in your seam line. And then you'll just want to press the seam out with your fingers. And just like we did with the headband straps, you'll turn the piece right side out with the help of the turning tool, just easing it along through the tube. Now that the casing is turned right side out, I'm going to adjust it so that the seam falls straight down the middle. And I'll make sure that the seam allowance is open on the inside. You can use the point of your scissors to sort of help adjust that to make sure that it's open. And you'll be able to feel if it's lying flat. So I've adjusted that, it's open, and then I'm going to press it flat. And now I'm going to finish the casing by folding the edges under about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch. I'll start doing this by just trimming off the excess fray, and then using your fingers, you want to just fold that under about 1/4 inch. It's a little bit tricky because it's a tight space. You can even use like a tool like a safety pin just to sort of help you get in there. And once that's turned under, you can press that flat. And then you'll repeat the same process with the other side. To finish the headband, I'll slide the casing over the elastic, complete the circle of the headband, and then top stitch the casing into place. First, I'm gonna clean up the raw edges. I can clip the raw edge of the strap, and then inside here, clip the elastic if it's fraying at all, and then just clip this raw edge. Now to cover the elastic, I'll use a safety pin on the elastic and help slide that through the casing tube. You want to make sure that the seam side of the casing is lined up with the seam side of the straps. So I'm just using the safety pin from the turning tool to help kind of guide that elastic through the casing, kind of bunching up the casing and then sliding it down over the elastic. It's a little bit of a tight fit, but having it sort of tight, you know that'll give you a polished look in the end. And then you want to make sure that you're not unfolding that raw edge that we folded down. So just slide that in. And we'll unclip the safety pin and slide that back through. And now that the casing is over the elastic, we're actually going to go back and repeat what we did in step 5, where we did that sandwiching technique to complete the circle. One thing to note, you just want to make sure that the seam side is on the same side. So we're going to pin the elastic to the straps like so, making sure that both the clean edges are facing up. So I'm going to take this to the machine and stitch it. Because I want the top stitch to look really clean when I'm sewing, I might take all of these stitches with the hand wheel so that I can go a little bit slower and have more control. It also helps to start about 1/8 inch in and then backstitch to the edge and then sew across so that your backstitch is quite clean. Top stitch both sides, clip your threads, and you're done. Thanks so much for sewing with me today. I hope you had fun and learned a few new sewing skills. I brought Amelia back to show off our completed headband project. We love this headband to add a pop of color to a simple outfit or to pair it with a matching print dress for a vintage inspired look.
We are Amelia and Emily, the co-founders of Wildflower Delivery Co., and we look forward to sewing with you again soon. Please see the link below to check out our other sewing kits on our website and subscribe to our channel to stay in touch. Goodbye for now.